I'm J.G. Michael, and this is Parallax Views. I also wanted to ask you, getting back to your Mother's Day article, you're arguing that, we need to sort of take up pro-family positions instead of allowing Republicans to sort of have, I think you call it the ideological monopoly on pro-family policies. Can you discuss that more?
Yeah, just in the same way patriotism has been ceded to the right. These terms are not right, they're not right-left. In my mind, to be family values is not to go to church on Sunday and then be a bad player in terms of allowing people to live decent lives the rest of the week by voting for cuts in Medicaid, or like cuts in school budgets, cuts in all of these arenas which are needed to raise a family, a strong family. Now, it's not necessarily family. Families come in different ways and different directions and different meanings, but it does mean to cut the crap about the hypocrisy of one party being the family values party. I thought that was long gone, but this kind of pro-natalist stuff, I've seen it in Moscow because for many years, abortion was the only birth control in Russia for a long time, which is not the way, but Stalin banned abortion. And then it came, but it's, there is a big move on to grow families. That's not pro-family to have bigger sized families, but it is pro-family to support what families need to be healthy, housed, fed, remunerated with a decent job, dignity. So I push back on this idea that, in my mind, patriotism, as our editorial board member Eric Fono wrote in the wake of 9/11, dissent is the ultimate form of patriotism. One loves one's country, but you understand it's still evolving. It has not reached the high point of blesseddom,
I feel a very similar way about how the right has sort of taken the term freedom and liberty, as like, oh, that's our domain, and it's like, no, not really. I think there's, FDR, the four freedoms, the left has a word on that too.
The four freedoms, if anyone comes to New York, please go to the Roosevelt Island to see the Louis Kahn Four Freedoms Monument. But I used to have an argument with my father, who helped build the Four Freedoms Park. My favorite speech is Roosevelt's is the Economic Bill of Rights, which I used to say if a politician in these last decades gave it, they'd be driven out of Washington, but Bernie does a version of it. But you're right, the four freedoms: freedom of worship, freedom of speech, freedom from want, freedom from fear. And I think those principles don't belong to one party.
Why? I hope this isn't too off topic, but why do you think we do sort of cede these things to the right at times?
Because they've been burnished by people many see hypocrisy running through. That they're used by political actors often in hypocritical ways. That there are many factors. There's a policing, I think, over generations of words that we've used. People feeling like, I had a friend, someone who worked at The Nation years ago, who didn't value the Working Families Party because of families. But I think
that's
families, but families are designed in different ways, and that's a position that the right does not take. And DEI, diversity, equality, inclusion, is important, but it's been so stigmatized. The stigmatization is something to fight too, of course. But we're in rocky times. A lot of terms are up for grabs. A lot of words are policed. And it's complicated. I'm not saying it's easy, but I don't think we should cede these terms. And someone who's been kind of interesting on this is Senator Chris Murphy. He's not perfect, but he's been thinking a little bit about the spiritual kind of backdrop of politics, which extends to the idea that people don't have communities that they used to, labor halls or, evangelical churches. But there was a community space that has been usurped by the internet. And I see how, like Occupy many years ago, people I think were excited to be part of that because of the politics, but also because you were in a circle or in a group with people. You were not just at your computer. And there is a kind of backlash to the internet, which could result in community or could result in, just isolation, deeper isolation.
I thought it was interesting at the end of that Mother's Day article, you point out that, the Trump administration takes a lot of its ideas on this from like Putin or Orban, but when it's not doing that, it's taking ideas
from Cory Booker, Tammy Baldwin.
Talk about that.
Because Bernie Sanders has talked about debt relief and AOC's talked about childcare, and Elizabeth Warren has talked about healthcare. Healthcare is still the leading cause of bankruptcy in this country. So and there is this coming back to family values. We shouldn't cede family values, but we should give family values meaning. Fill it with real purpose and meaning, which I think happens, but it doesn't get framed in the same way. I do think Republicans are skittish, many of them, about cutting Medicaid. It's interesting, if you remember, Social Security, talking Roosevelt, was not passed as it is now. It left out vast swaths of people, domestic workers, African American, and largely. But Medicare was the bookend in the Great Society. And you remember during the Tea Party, God, does that seem long ago? The guy who said, "Get government's hands off my Medicare." These programs are so embedded in people's lives. So you see the hatred of government, which animates a lot of what we're talking about, but not when it comes to programs that have been embedded in families, people's lives for a long time. There's a concreteness to politics, which is sometimes lost. But 2 years ago, I think I wrote a column, which was Biden should give every family a hearing aid. They were expensive then, before the FDA lowered the price, and send the hearing aid from Joe Biden, as Mr. Trump did. Remember the checks he sent during COVID, signed by Donald Trump? People thought they were getting a check from Trump. Now that's a little too transactional for left progressive politics, but it's real.
That's one thing. I don't know if you have thoughts on this, but I sometimes felt like the Biden administration, I feel like it didn't tout what it was doing on the domestic front enough at times. Whether it was, I think it did a lot of good with Jonathan Cantor at DOJ and Lena Khan at the FTC.
Are you kidding? Lena Khan led Democrats to be apoplectic because she was effective and she was clear about what she was going to do. I think part of the problem with the Biden administration was Biden never found his mechanism to speak. Every president has found his, not her, but his kind of radio chat, et cetera, et cetera. But I think there was also the fact they were trying to pass some of this tough legislation with a really tough Congress. So they didn't want to be as open and clear. The sadness was the care economy was kind of, in my mind, the second piece to the industrial infrastructure economy. It was almost a gendered feel to it. The sadness about losing the care economy was you didn't have the support, and Manchin played a bad role. But that was a really important moment when child poverty was cut in half.
Right, you talk about that in the article with the rescue plan
huge.
That doubled the child tax credit, or almost doubled, yeah.
That shows that we can do it if we want to do it. There's all this talk about how you could never cut child poverty, the war on poverty failed. It didn't fail. It failed because you had the resources driven into austerity or military equipment as opposed to into children's bellies.